Imagine waking up in Rome in the middle of summer. The stone streets are already heating beneath the sun. Your room has no air conditioning, there is no electric fan beside your bed, and there is definitely no refrigerator waiting in the kitchen. By afternoon, parts of the city can feel baked by the heat. Yet Romans lived through summers like this for centuries. So what did they actually do? They could not cool an entire city, but they found surprisingly clever ways to escape the worst of the heat. And if you were rich enough, one of those solutions involved bringing something very close to winter into Rome in the middle of summer. Rome really did have hot, dry Mediterranean summers, and Roman architects understood that sunlight could make an uncomfortable building even worse. The architect Vitruvius recommended arranging rooms differently depending on their purpose and the season. Summer dining rooms, for example, could face north, where they received less direct summer sun. Roman cooling, therefore, began with one extremely simple idea. If sunlight is making you miserable, keep the sunlight away. Walk through a Roman city, and shade could be built directly into the environment. Porticoes created covered walkways, where people could move without standing beneath the full force of the sun. Colonnades and covered spaces provided protection around buildings and public areas. And nowhere was the Roman obsession with shade more dramatic than inside enormous entertainment venues. At the Colosseum, tens of thousands of spectators could spend hours sitting beneath the summer sun. So the Romans used the Velarium, a huge system of fabric awnings stretched above much of the seating. They could not cool the air. Instead, they tried to stop the sun from reaching you in the first place. But eventually shade was not enough. You needed water, and this is where Rome had a major advantage. Aqueducts carried enormous quantities of water from distant sources into the city. That water supplied baths, fountains, basins, and other public uses. An ordinary Roman living in a crowded apartment might not have a private pipe or fountain inside the home, but public water was far more accessible than it would have been in many ancient cities. The Romans could not make summer disappear, but they could build a city supplied by an extraordinary amount of water. And then there were the baths. At first, that sounds like the last place you would want to visit while already sweating, but a Roman bathhouse was not simply one enormous hot pool. Large bath complexes contained rooms at different temperatures. There was the warm tepidarium, the hot caldarium, and then the frigidarium, an unheated room with cold water. Roman baths existed for bathing, exercise, and social life rather than simply escaping summer heat. But if you had spent the day roasting outside, access to a cold pool could feel extremely welcome. Of course, money made surviving the heat much easier. A wealthy Roman did not have to rely only on a public fountain or the nearest patch of shade. The house itself could be designed around the sun. Elite homes and villas could contain shaded colonnades, gardens, courtyards, and rooms intended for different seasons or different times of day. Vitruvius specifically described summer dining rooms facing north because they avoided the strongest direct summer heat. Instead of expecting one room to remain comfortable throughout the entire year, wealthy Romans could simply move through their homes as conditions changed. The poor Roman looked for shade. The rich Roman could build the shade into his house. And if even that was not enough, the richest Romans had another solution: leave Rome. Wealthy families could retreat to country or coastal villas, away from the crowded streets and dense buildings of the capital. Villas around places such as Tibur, modern Tivoli, offered gardens, shaded spaces, and different local conditions. While an ordinary worker still had to remain in the city, a senator with enough money could simply remove himself from the problem. Roman cooling, like almost everything else in Roman life, became much easier when you were rich. But the strangest luxury appeared at the dinner table. Imagine sitting in Rome during summer, and somebody places a chilled drink in front of you. There is no refrigerator. There is no freezer. So where did the cold come from? Snow. Roman writers describe snow and ice being collected, stored, transported, and used to cool drinks. Pliny the Elder even describes Emperor Nero having water cooled using snow. Snow could also be used around containers of wine, and special strainers became associated with chilled drinks. Something that feels completely ordinary today, a cold drink on a hot afternoon, could therefore become an expensive luxury in ancient Rome. Think about what that actually required. Somewhere outside the hot city, snow had to be gathered while it was available. It then had to be preserved or transported before finally reaching somebody wealthy enough to pay for it. By the time a Roman aristocrat received chilled wine at dinner, The cold itself had become part of the display. You were not simply cooling your drink, you were showing everyone around the table that you could afford winter in the middle of summer. But most Romans were not sitting in villas drinking chilled wine surrounded by fountains. They still sweated. They still worked outdoors. Crowded buildings could still become uncomfortable, and a fountain, an awning, or a cold bath did not magically transform Rome into an air-conditioned city. That is the important part of the story. The Romans did not defeat summer. They adapted their lives around it. So if you suddenly found yourself standing in ancient Rome during the hottest part of the year, you would have no fan, no refrigerator, and no air conditioner. But you would quickly learn the Roman rule for surviving the heat: follow the shade, stay near the water, move with the sun, and if you happen to be extremely rich, order some snow for your wine.